Welcome back to What Am I Modeling? Sometimes you meet someone and you can just feel that they're living from a completely different place than most people. And that's exactly what happened when I first met today's guest, Kiersten KT Willis, in a hip hop class many, many years ago. I was this burned out doctor desperately trying to find my way back to myself. And here was this young woman in her late 20s teaching dance with this incredible presence, not performing, not trying to impress anyone, just authentically herself in a way that was honestly magnetic. There was something about how she moved, how she connected with people that made you think, okay, she's figured out something that the rest of us are still searching for. What happened with Kiersten after we met was one of the most courageous decisions that I've ever heard of. She walked away from pursuing a professional dance career in LA, the dream that so many kill for, to become a dancing missionary. What she thought would be 1 year turned into many years of working in urban schools with kids dealing with real trauma from all different backgrounds. And it completely transformed not just her life, but how she understood what it means to serve from authentic love versus serving for a need of acceptance. Kiersten's story is about surrender, about following a calling that doesn't make sense to anyone else, and about what it looks like to model faith in action. She's someone who learned early that the world's definition of success and God's definitions of success are completely different things, and she chose authenticity over applause. She's also the host of the Collective's Table podcast, where she continues to create space for real conversations about faith and community. But honestly, what I love the most about KT is that she's genuinely herself, which in a world of people performing their lives is actually pretty revolutionary. It's my pleasure to have on the show Kiersten KT Willis. Welcome, Kiersten KT Willis. I am so happy to have you here, really.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me.
I want to take you back. And I don't know if this moment was as interesting to you as it was to me. I really don't. You were so young. Might have been, gosh, I don't know, 2018, 2017, something like that. And I'm in a dance class. I'm a burned out doctor. I had just lost my mom. I was going through a complete rebuild of my identity, of who I was as a person. I didn't share that with people. And I was bringing myself back to who I was by just getting back into dance because I was a dancer as a kid. And I thought, okay, if there's ever a chance of bringing myself back, I've got to just move and I've got to just find my music. And I'm just going to walk into this class with a bunch of 14-year-olds as this random adult. And I don't know what wisdom I'm going to impart on them. I don't know what they're going to think of me if I'm going to be judged, but I'm just going to walk in and I'm just going to learn how to dance again. And I'm just going to be there for me. And you came in very close to that journey into my life as a substitute. You came in to teach a class. And I don't know if at that young age you recognized what an impact your energy was, but you would come in and you'd say, okay, let's all sit down, let's get to know each other. There was a genuine love from you to us, and there was a genuine love in movement. And it was very clear that you were far ahead of your years. And I just remember thinking, wow, I like this girl. Like, she's cool. And I don't know that I could even do your dances. I think I probably just stood there and threw my arms in the air and spun around in circles and had no freaking idea what I was doing. But did you? There was like a spark there. And I was like, I'm going to keep in touch with her because she's on a bigger path somewhere, which is what inspires me as a physician, as a mom, as a human, as a retired model that grew up in a world where people weren't authentic. I saw your authenticity. Do you remember that? Or am I the only one that remembers meeting you in that room and the beautiful energy that you carried? Did you even know you had it?
To be honest, yes. I think at that time of my life, I was probably the most firm in where I was going and what I was called to do. Um, and I, without a shadow of a doubt, knew that dance was a platform and a window, an avenue for me to be able to connect with people. I was very clear, probably since high school, that I wanted to be around people, help people. And in that 2016, actually, I would probably say from 2015 to 2019 was a very solid season of me being very firm in who I was and where I was going. Now, there's some spins after that, but in that time, yeah, I do feel like I was in my pocket for sure.
I think it's and how old were you? Like mid 20s?
Well, see, I'm 36 now, so you said
Yeah.
2017. That's 3, 5, 8, 6, 28.
Yeah, and that's rare. I don't know if you know that, but it is rare for somebody to come in and have that much conviction with who they are, especially in today's day and age. You with social media and influences and outside influences. I mean, I don't have to tell you. You grew up, you're in a dance world, right? Like, it's a lot of lack of authenticity and a lot of fake dreams of success. And there's a lot of things that I so want to dive into about in just taking the time to get to know you, even slowly over the years, and what you're all about. And your mission is heartwarming and authentic and real. And that's why I want you here on this show. And so, anyone listening who goes through hard times, who feels like they don't fit in, who is bullied, who has depression, who has anxiety, that feels like they're lost, they don't know where they want to be, they think that the world is things are happening to them rather than for them, this is the episode for you because we are going to dive into the lessons that we learn and intuition and faith. And I know there's so many different twists to your story. And I was listening to you talk about when you were a kid in another interview, and you were talking about how like you used to get up and preach and you were always in front of the camera and you were always kind of knew who you were authentically and then found yourself, if I recall, in more of a toxic relationship. And I kind of want to open with that because I've done the same thing. And there's so many people that, you're given these opportunities, and I know you'll speak to this, but you're given these situations and you have a choice. You come down to, do I want to stay in this lane? Do I want to trust this lane? And the trust is scary. So, can we talk a little bit as before you met me, where you were at in your life and the struggles that you were enduring?
Yeah, so right before, well, I guess you met me in a very good season, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, I had went through a season of figuring out who I was. And I think we kind of always stay in some form of that. But for me, post high school is when a lot of things changed for me. So I went from being a very zealous young person, a teenager, to meeting my first relationship, like real relationship. It shifting my world upside down because everything that I thought I would not do, I somehow ended up in. And it was very opposite of how people would have projected my life choices, especially with a partner. And so for me, I think that being exposed to the reality of heartbreak, of manipulation, of deceit, and also disappointment within myself, if I'm honest, right? So it's like I went from, I think as I'm even saying this, I'm looking at the patterns in my life of having seasons of a lot of confidence and a lot of assurance, and then getting twisted and being like, okay, disoriented. And so, yeah, that relationship definitely rocked me. It was something that I wasn't expecting and something that really was devastating, to be honest. As an 18-year-old, a freshman in college, meeting this man who lied to me about his age, didn't reveal that he had a kid, my first sexual experience, and then having repercussions from that, that was life changing and life altering to the point of a doctor telling me that I need to have a surgery to take part of my cervix out that would mean I wouldn't have kids. And this is all in my first experience. Um, my first experience of that magnitude and just being devastated because I was a virgin up until that that relationship, and my plan had been to wait till marriage. So just all these expectations falling, and it was something that was very, very hard and also life changing because it deepened my faith in the aspect of having to get to a point where I'm surrendering back to God and saying, hey, I know that this wasn't the ideal choice to make, and now I'm in the thick of all of these consequences. I just have to surrender. And then experiencing a physical miracle of being healed, where then I did not have to have that surgery, which is a literal miracle. And then from there, once you experience a physical miracle, there's no going back, there's no explanation for it. It's something that you now have to shift forward with in a different way.
And there's so much there because I think, when you're little, you're like, "Oh, you're gonna have this beautiful wedding and this house with a picket fence, and you're gonna have, this and that, and all of it's gonna happen by I'm 25, and it's my whole life is like, like you plan out your whole life, and then when it doesn't go that way, you find yourself questioning. I did a very similar thing. I moved in with a drug addict. Like, what was I like it didn't even make sense. Like it was
Yeah.
like and everyone's like, what is she doing with him? But in hindsight, I look back and I see why now. As an almost 50-year-old woman, why did I have to go through that to get where I am today? There was a reason. And you don't always see it in the moment, right? And you said there was so much you said there that was just we could just talk about it all day, but so changing your identity and figuring out who you are, and you aren't who you thought you were, or maybe you are but you've been detoured, but you had to surrender. And we don't surrender enough in our life. We control, and we think about, okay, I'm going to control who my friends are. I'm going to control what my job is. I'm going to control, I mean, heck, I'm a mom. I control whether or not the dishwasher's been emptied or not, right? Like every little thing is like, I have to control it. And one of the major life shifts for me around the time that I met you was I've got to let go, and I've got to just be. So, talk to me a little bit about surrender, because where this started to lead you into some of the urban missionary work you did is just, I mean, KT, it's amazing. So, talk to me about that surrender and that transformation into what you started doing by surrendering.
I wish that we as human beings didn't have to go through that. But to your point, how we're wired, you you get to this point in life and everybody has the choice to either keep bumping your head or surrender. So life, different environments, experiences is going to get you to a point of, okay, do you want to keep doing this? Which is like the addiction, right? And I think something that's important for people to understand is addiction is not just alcohol or, drugs on the street. Addiction can be fame, addiction can be work, it can be anything. But this idea of like continuing to hit your head, like you're addicted to that process. And so I think for me, that relationship was my first experience of understanding the importance of surrender, because it's like, okay, I choose to deviate from what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. And then I reap these huge repercussions. And it's not fair. Something when I was on the Urban Missionary Tour performing arts group, we came up with a show that was based on our own personal lives. And there was a line that I had in one of my acting scenes where I said, we can choose the decisions that we make, but we can't pick the consequences. And that experience was where that came from. Because in that moment of having this health scare is feeling like it's not fair. I knew people that had been sexually active prior, young. And it's like they're not experiencing this to that extreme. And so, like, my first experience, that's not fair. However, that is the reality of life. You choose to make a decision, but you don't get to pick the consequence. And so that was a big shift for me. And ultimately, my faith has been something that has been a part of my life right about 7 or 8 years old. And so that's an intertwining theme that I always come back to. And so when I got in that season of feeling very misaligned, very lost, I'm like, okay, God, I'm surrendering back to you. And then these opportunities start to align for me to share more. So, to your point, the older that you get, you realize not necessarily, I think for me, speaking for myself, when I say would I choose to do it again, it's like nobody wants to go through those things. However, what I learned from that experience and the ability to meet people where they're at and to tell young people um, two things. One is like giving them the forefront, the disclaimer, so that they can make better decisions was very, very important to me. And then also for the people that have made decisions like me and maybe losing hope, and then me being able to say, like, no, there still is hope. You still can make different decisions. You still can turn things around was so, so pivotal for me of implementing that idea of surrender. Is like, okay, surrender is letting go of expectations and understanding that there is a deeper meaning, that there is a deeper importance, and that there is an ability to shift.
Trust it. Despite leaving everything and going to LA and having like your car stolen and like you had all sorts of I just remember you went through so much when you decided to just leave and I'm sure it's like you found yourself saying, "What the heck am I doing? Like I know I'm supposed to be here, but this is crazy," right?
There's so many moments of that.
So many people give up. Why do you think you didn't?
I think that there's a couple of things. And it's making, I'm a very emotional girl, so there'll probably be tears at some point.
Well, then that we're in trouble because I'm exactly the same way. So we'll just cry.
Like
We'll
all
just
of you
cry
know
it
that's
out.
real.
We'll just cry it out. It's okay. We're being real. Go for it.
I think that it was really hard for me to fight for me, which is a whole nother conversation. But at the end of the day, what has always got me back up is understanding that my life is not just about me. My life is connected to other people. What God has given me for whatever reason that I don't understand, he saw it fit to put me in the earth at this time and to give me this life. And if I do not show up, then I'm affecting other people. And it's twofold in the aspect of my faith and my desire to please God and knowing that He's given me something to give and wanting to be a good steward of that and not wanting to like get to the end of my life and Him being like, hey, you I gave you all of this. What did you do with it? And for me to have some excuse of I was too upset, I was too angry, I was too scared, I was too whatever. So wanting to be a good steward of that, but then also understanding the reality of, you learn the food chain in elementary school. That's talking about how literally every species is connected to each other. And that same principle is about us as human beings. We are in this chain of life that affects all people. And so sometimes people are like, oh, well, like I'm not that important, etc. I think if people could shift to understand that no, you are important, even if it's like you're not a Mahatma Gandhi, you're not a Martin Luther King Jr., you're not somebody that like we read about in the history books, does not change the effect of how important your life and how you show up is in that chain.
Yeah, I was just at the National Speakers Association conference the last few days and talking about, my message and where I want to speak and what are the things that I want to do. And one of the things that I kept bringing up was self worth, how we keep thinking, well, if we just do this, then, if we just keep trying this, then we'll be good enough. And the message that I know you believe in and I believe in is we are all already good enough. We are what we are, and we are in this process where we are for a reason. In fact, my wall right here says, today you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Tomorrow, what happens is up to you. And as I watch, I mean, I know when you were doing the urban missionary work, you were going into schools, right? And you were talking to kids who came from broken homes, that came from abusive homes, that, had a lot of challenges. And that so speaks to me because obviously the experiences that we live in our life, whatever they are. I mean, you could have people that grew up with a beautiful family, tons of money, whatever, and they end up killing themselves. Like it's not the downtrodden circumstances that always end in those situations, a lot of the times it's a meaningful family. Maybe it's something that someone said out of good intention, that someone internalized in some way that made them feel that they were not worth it. I was a model, right? I was always told I wasn't good enough. I have a beautiful family, very supportive. I didn't come from, a horrible place, but we take those and we internalize it, and then we put it in our lives that we can't achieve something until, and we keep moving the goalpost. And I think it's such a valuable thing. I'd like to know, from working with those kids and meeting all of those people. I mean, even before you started traveling the world, just when you started going into schools and performing for them, are there certain people that just, like, stories from that where you're like, oh my God, one kid, man, just changed my life just from hearing their story or interacting with them? Are there any pivotal moments from that experience that changed the way you look at the world?
Yeah, I do want to emphasize what you just said is what I learned on tour is that no matter what part of the country you're in, whether it was a low income neighborhood or a very high income neighborhood, the kids were still struggling. And what was important is understanding that everybody's struggle is different, but it does not mean that it is not valid. And that's really, really important. As far as kids, one girl in particular always stands out to me, which emphasizes what I just said, is when we were at our after party, which is where we get to be more open about our faith because in the schools you can't. She came up to me and said that almost like detail for detail had the same story as me and was like hearing you say that you can have a better life and that I am worthy lets me know that that's true for me. And so that emphasized that idea of, okay, what we go through is not just for us. So in that moment, I'll never forget that was a switch for me in understanding that I wouldn't change my past. Because before it's like, of course, if I could go back and take the worst part of my life out, I would. But in that moment, it's like if if going through all of that meant that I got to have that moment with that young girl, I would do it again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And, we grow through these challenges. We grow as people, right? And to serve other people. And I think it's how you show up in the world. Are you showing up in the world to serve other people in whatever capacity that is? And how can I lift them up? And how can I help them recognize something, right? Is you live your life with such value. And often those things that we went through that, let's be honest, sucked, like,
Yeah.
just wasn't fun, was worth it in the end because it helped lift someone else up. And it's such a beautiful message, and something that I really do feel we lose. And now that I'm a little bit older than you, I mean, I know, I feel like I'm young. I feel like I'm 30, but that's
Yes.
okay. I'm a little bit older than you. But what I'm finding is, as I speak to women in particular in their 40s, starting to go through perimenopause, starting to send our kids off to college. I mean, my son is going to be 18 in May. Like, what?
Yeah.
And we're going through these life changes. And a lot of us are feeling that same struggle that we felt when we were 14. When I walked into that hip hop class, the reason I felt at home is because where I was in my life and feeling the doubt in who I was and who I was supposed to show up as was exactly what those 14-year-olds were going through. Like,
Mm,
exactly.
yeah.
I was reminded, my gosh, I've been here before. I know what this feels like, and I know I can overcome it, and I can be a mentor for them. If they're not cheering on and they're not doing their thing during their dance class and they're hiding kind of in the back, I can be there to say, "Hey, come forward. Like, you're awesome,"
Yeah.
just because I knew I could lift them up, and in turn that lifted me up, and then they were cheering me on. These young girls cheering on this old lady for no reason in a dance class, right? That impact, and you've imparted this in every single thing that you've done. So if I remember, you're gonna have to clarify on the story, but you do this tour, right? And then it was kind of like, okay, I got to go back to the real world. Do I take a full-time job? What do I do now? And you did the opposite of what most people would do. What'd you do?
Well, yes, I came back and everybody now is starting to have babies. They're getting married, and I go back to living at my mom's house, the same room that I grew up going to high school in. And so it definitely was a little bit of an ego thing for me. Of like, "Mm, I think I should have more than this. And having to surrender again of like, okay, this is what the reality is. And I ended up taking a teaching job actually at a charter school, which I really, really loved because it was working with Title I. So all the kinds of kids that I wanted to be around. Um, and then I got wrongfully let go at that job. And again, I had another moment of surrender, being like, okay, like I just got this job. I felt like I could do this forever. And I know this was not right, but having that internal dialogue of like, okay, God being like, chill, just chill. And I'm like, okay, but why? Because this doesn't make any sense. And then getting the offer to continue being an urban missionary, working for a local Phoenix nonprofit that worked with young people. And so it was a reinforcer that every time I'm willing to surrender, God is going to step in and provide something even more than the last, more than what I anticipate. And so I continued being an urban missionary for another couple of years with an organization that I really, really loved. And I had already been volunteering for several years before that.
And you traveled the world, right? Not
Yeah.
just local, right?
Yeah. So with them, there are two main countries that they worked with were Puerto Rico and Haiti. So I was able to go to both and the Dominican Republic. So yeah, I went to three countries when I was working with that organization.
What was your main takeaway from that time in your life? The lesson in that moment of your life?
The main takeaways would be how important it is to follow that inner tug. I think that if you look back on your life, you can see that the traces of who you're called to be are all up in there. So to your point of when I shared about like being a young kid and doing the Bible studies, doing the preaching, I was using my parents' camcorder to make movies, however good they were, and casting the kids in my apartments to play those roles. So those things were always in there, and then being able to come underneath an organization and make that impact and be responsible for fundraising, which is another part of faith and a part of trust and a part of surrender. It really emphasized the fact that the impossible is possible for me.
Did you always grow up in faith? Was it just part of your routine as a kid?
Yeah, in some sort of fashion, when my parents were together, yeah, there was always some remnant of faith, although it wasn't very strong for a while because we were kind of in and out until I was in junior high school is when a big shift happened for me as a young kid spiritually.
What was the shift?
I went to a youth conference. My best friend at the time invited me to her godmother's church, and shout out to Jerome Parker. He was the youth pastor there at the time. And it was just so much fun. And I was like, wow, your faith being in church can be fun. The way they taught the lessons, I was able to actually understand it because of how they communicated. And then being around other young people that had that same fire and faith was just a huge pivotal point for me.
It's funny because I didn't grow up with a routine of going to church. I had I call her my grandmother. She wasn't actually related to me, but she took me in as a kid. And she was Catholic, not every week Catholic, but, Easter Catholic. Like she'd go for mass on Easter and she would drag me along. And I remember thinking, okay, like I have to sit here with my hands perfectly folded and I have to just listen to everyone sing. And I was like, this doesn't really seem like a ton of fun. So, of course, as kids, we're like, great, it's Easter. We got to go to church, right?
Yeah.
And then fast forward when I started to become more curious, I'm going to get to the words you gave me because curiosity was one of them. And I think it's a great word. But I started to get more curious in college when I was at ASU. I took a class, on world, yeah, Sun Devil. Woo, woo. I took a class on like world religions or something. And one of the assignments was we had to go to multiple denominations. We had to try all sorts of different things. So I went to an Islamic, I went to a yoga, I went to a Catholic, I went to a Mormon. I mean, I went to them all. And I thought, I'm just going to go and I'm just going to see like what's the vibe at all these places. And what blew me away was how religions are so different. Like they really are. The energy of each one is different. The messages obviously are very similar in how we help our community and each other and trust and surrender and all these things we're talking about. But the way that they were communicated was so incredibly different and so eye opening for me And I'm so glad I did that because so many of us, grow up without that experience. And then we can't quite understand. And I attribute that experience to how I can understand where you're coming from, even though I didn't grow up in that same discipline. And it was really it was really fascinating. The Islamic and the Muslim churches were interesting to me because we were all in separate rooms, and I'm like, I'm watching this on a screen. All the men were in one side and all the women were in the other with all the children with the TV screen. It was just looking at the different cultures and the different ways that people were raised in faith was fascinating to me, and um honestly rather confusing at the time as well, but nonetheless a good experience. I had a question out of there for you, but now I lost it.
It's okay.
Take it away, KT.
I'm really glad that you did that. I took a similar class. I'm trying to think if I was at ASU at the time or if I was at MCC. Um, but it's important to do that. It's important to connect because also what I think is important, regardless if you choose to agree with it or not, I think that it is important to understand what people actually believe versus what people say they believe. A lot of conflict comes from assumption instead of understanding. And so you in a person's spiritual journey, I know that some people within my specific faith belief would probably not agree with me, but that's okay. In my journey, I say ask questions, figure it out, go seek so that you can truly make a decision based on what your heart is connecting to versus just picking something because somebody else told me this is what I should pick. I think that God is infinite and that he is powerful enough to deal with questions.
For sure. And I think the judgment too. I mean, it's kind of a different subject, but I was in a room recently, there was someone speaking, and they were a very different background and upbringing from where we were. Like their experience was vastly different from mine, right? It just completely different. And something that I couldn't possibly comprehend because I wasn't there. And I'm watching this speaker and I'm looking at their intention and the lesson that they're teaching from their experiences. And I'm just enjoying it. I'm like, well, that's an interesting perspective, just kind of like do. And they're over here getting angry. How dare they say that? They can't understand, blah, blah, blah. Getting all mad and judgmental. They got up and left the room. And I was like, okay, wait a minute here. Like, we all have our own audience, right? Sometimes things that I say are going to offend some people, or maybe they don't resonate with it. They don't jive with me, and that's okay. I'm
Mhm.
just speaking from what I know because that's all I've been given, right? At the moment, that's all I have. And that's all this person had. And the intention of this person was pure. It was 100% pure love and intention, even if the message did not resonate with all of the audience. And I try to think about that, especially as I watch and I talk to my kids about it too, like as we watch all these different viewpoints in the world and everyone's going to have a different opinion, is is the person speaking from their own personal experience with good intention? And if they are, then that's good, right? Like that's okay. They're allowed to say that. We can't shut people down just because we differ. Maybe we can learn something and be thankful for the fact that we didn't have that experience. And maybe we've learned something through our experience that allowed us to grow beyond that. And I think it's such a valuable lesson for the younger generations in particular that we all, like you were saying, that we all connect to each other in some way, but
Yeah.
we all fit into the world in a different way. We all come from different forests, And so some of us might eat berries and some of us might eat lions. We got to figure out how to work together coming from different places. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that the older that I've gotten, the more that I've been able to travel, that similar concept has rang true for me. I think that you restrict yourself from experiencing God and knowing who you are if you cut people off and can't listen. You don't have to agree with somebody to listen. You don't have to live the same life as somebody to receive. And I think that is one of the biggest lessons for me is I am at a place in my life and maturity where I can read material or listen to somebody who is in a completely different opposite faith than me and still be able to be like, okay, that is an interesting perspective, like you said. and like, oh, I don't agree with that at all, and still have a respect for this person. Because for me, in my faith of, if I say that I believe this, then it means that everyone is made in the image of God. Whether I like their ideals or the way they deliver or whatever, this is an image bearer. And so that means that they have something that is divine for me to learn from or someone else to learn from. Maybe if, to your point, I'm not resonating with this person, doesn't mean that they don't have something to give. And that's like a longer conversation, but definitely I have learned that the more you are humble enough to know that there's so much in the world, that if an infinite God has placed himself in all of these things, then it is important to be open and listening as opposed to just constantly pouring out what you think and being so narrow minded.
When you were coming on the show, I asked you for a few words that kind of represent what you've learned. And I just want to read those off because I'd love you to talk about them because they're beautiful. And I think you need to add one more to your list. And I think you need to add surrender to your list because
Mm.
you've definitely done that a lot. And I think that's an important one. But you said faith, humility, curiosity, perseverance, and accountability. And I loved this balance because faith obviously has a lot to do with surrender and trust, but you don't know the outcome, right?
Yes,
You don't know what's going on.
yes,
Humility, meaning you have to be open.
yes.
Curiosity, meaning you have to seek things that you may not understand, and perseverance to power through. But what I thought was the most interesting one was the accountability. Because you can imagine all these things, you can plan all these things out, you can choose a path, but if you don't hold yourself accountable to the standard that you have set out for yourself, none of it matters. So can we talk about why did you pick those words and what do they mean to you?
Well, the first thing that comes up to in my mind is in regards to relationships and getting out of unhealthy relationships. There is a very true fact of when someone has done something to you, when you have been betrayed in one form or another, of you being a victim. However, when you attach yourself to that mentality of victimhood, you limit yourself in being able to heal and being able to move forward. And so, accountability is saying, not dismissive of what someone has done to you or what circumstance has given you certain cards, but rather, how do I show up in this space and what choices am I able to control? Right? It's this the serenity prayer. Like, that has never made more sense to me than now. It's okay, there are certain things that I cannot control. Let me let go of that. Let me surrender. But there are things that I can control, and that is what I'm responsible for. And at the end of the day, what I am accountable for. I'm not accountable for Jim, Billy, and Susie. That's not my life. I'm accountable for Kiersten. I am accountable for what I have and what I am supposed to give. And so, yeah.
Dude, I cannot wait to see you when you're my age. Man, I'm just going to be like sitting down and be like, "Can you knit me a sweater and talk to me about your life?" Like it there is so much wisdom in you that I know you feel, but I don't even know if you fully recognized the power that you have in just being you on people like me. You're truly a gift. And it makes me tear, but you are truly a gift to this world. You are. I hope you know that. Um, Tell people about your podcast because you just launched this, right?
Did. So it's been on my heart. Number one, thank you for that because that means so much to me. And it is important for us to, how you were talking about how you show up in a room and it's like, okay, what can I give here? If those girls aren't as confident, let me cheer them on. We need to cheer other people on because even the people that are in these high places or we have a viewpoint of every single person has doubt and insecurity in some form or fashion. And in my personal opinion, it is moments of affirmation, it is moments of encouragement and accountability because you can correct people in love. That is so helpful in moving forward. So I appreciate you taking a moment for that. And then, secondly, which I just forgot what you said. What was it?
Tell me about it.
Podcast, yes. So for two years, I had this inner inner knowing that I needed to do a podcast. And I'm like, okay, I had some friends that wanted to start one. We filmed an episode, then one of my friends that was the main person moved away, and so then it didn't happen. Then another one of my good friends wanted to start one. We filmed a thing, and then I'm like, okay, then it didn't work out. And so I'm like, I have to do it. Again, going back to that theme of like what you feel like that is something that you're responsible for. So I am so grateful that I was able to start that this year. Um, Thankfully, because people, part of every year for my birthday, I do a fundraiser to do different humanitarian and youth things, etc. And partly also to start last year was to start the podcast. And my heart for that is similar to what you're sharing with your platform is wanting people to share their stories in vulnerability, in authenticity, whatever way that shows up. So even if that's like part of my little spiel is even if it's a challenge. So how do we if this person has something that might be a little friction for somebody, I want that to be put out there because it is important for people to understand what you see on the outside is not always what's on the inside or what you're seeing as a finished product. There's a long story about how that person got to there. And so I was able to pop that off the beginning of this year. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that the people say yes, the people that are willing to come on and share their time and their experience and have moments of vulnerability. That's probably the most beautiful thing for me is when almost every person has said that there was a moment where they felt safe enough to share something that they normally wouldn't share.
I
And
love
that's
that
what the
too.
collective's table. The collective's
It's a
table is.
collectives table, yes, and I'll put a link to it. And I agree with you, and that's why I started my podcast as well. I love the vulnerable stories, and growing up in the industry I grew up in was full of a lot of imposter syndrome, and you're what everyone else says you're going to be today. Who are you really? We don't care. Like, no, you suck. Get out. Like, you're not tall enough. You're not skinny enough. You're not funny enough. You're not, and it doesn't just exist in the entertainment world. I grew up in it and it was the norm. But as I get older and I look at what's going on with social media, when I look at what's going on with who kids choose to be influenced by, who adults, is trying to trace the Joneses, we're trying to do what so and so did and so and so did and so and so did. We're putting ourselves into a position of a chronic imposter syndrome in comparison. And that is not serving us in any way. It's just going to hold us back. And so I'm truly grateful to you for also being on this mission of finding authenticity and vulnerability again and us coming together as a community. And I will 100% support you in any way that I can on your mission as well. And I can't wait to go listen to more episodes and see what comes out next. I'm psyched for you. And I'm so grateful that you took time out of your schedule to be here with me, that lonely, awkward adult in your teen hip hop class.
No, before, I don't know if we have a few seconds, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
give time to give you kudos because as you're sharing about how that impacted you, how you showed up impacted me. And it's something that I'm pulling from even now in the aspect of being in a similar scenario where now I'm the oldest one in the room. And it being, I have two choices. Either I can allow that to keep me back in how I show up, or the fact that, like, I think about you. I think about the fact that, wow, this woman did not let in what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know what you felt at that time, but the reality is if I'm a adult walking into a kid's class, I can let insecurity or how this looks keep me from receiving. And now knowing more detail about where you were in your life, that is so, so powerful. And it was powerful then to me, and it's even more powerful now to me as I am older. So thank you for taking that risk and showing up for yourself because it does resound.
And it's created a beautiful outlet for me for stress. And I mean, I take 7 dance classes a week now.
Yeah.
And it's pure joy. And it was those influence by all of you teachers that didn't kick me out. There were studios I went to and they're like, we don't take adults in the teen classes. Nope, nope. And you're a beginner. And I'm like, I'm not a beginner though. I know it's in I was an advanced dancer as a kid. I know I can do this. I just need to retrain my brain, my mind, my mindset to commit fully. And I think that's what going back into dance reminded me of, is that you have to commit 100% to whatever you do. And you have to just feel it. You have to feel the music. You have to perform the music from an authentic state. You have so much going on when you dance. Your brain is trying to remember the choreo, your body's trying to look like it needs to go, and yet you have to relax into it. If you don't relax into it, you're always fighting with your body on that movement and fighting for that perfection of, well, she said the arm had to be at 45 degrees and maybe yours is only at 40 degrees. And that's okay if it goes there with intention, and you're just letting your body move. And it taught me a very valuable lesson, which has led me to where I am now, which is you have to just find your music and feel it
Yeah.
and find the joy in that little moment, those tiny little micro moments where someone that was with me from the time she was 14 now is graduating and she's 18 and she's no longer in my class. And I get to see her blossom as a dancer along with me and cheer me on. And we're in completely different generations with seemingly nothing in common. It was a beautiful thing. And you really were an impact, still are an impact on me, but you were definitely an impact on me. And I will always remember that day because you made me feel very welcome and very accepted. I think you even shouted me out. You were like, look at this lady. If she can do it, you can do it.
Yeah. Let them know.
So, okay. So, we already talked about your podcast, but where can people find you? And I want to encourage my audience, go follow this woman. Seriously, just for the daily inspiration, for the love that pours out of your heart, for that alone, just go follow this woman. Be a support. Where can they find you? Mhm.
I'm mainly on Instagram. It's KDOTEE. People say K Doty. It's actually K.T because I go by KT. There's a whole story behind that, but that's my Instagram. That's where I'm most active. And then our podcast is The Collective's Table, and it's also on YouTube. We're getting ready to be on the audio form, so that's coming soon.
Excited for you. Thank you so much. Any parting words or advice for all the people listening as we sign off?
You matter, and what you're called to matters. So do not let life, insecurity, or fear keep you back from giving what you're called to give because we need it.
Beautiful. Thank you, Katie.